Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to this channel. My name's Christiana Davidson. I'm a psychotherapist and a hypnotherapist, and I specialize in the area of narcissistic abuse, especially in the family system. So if that's you, stick around, and especially stick around today if this topic, which is quite a heavy one, if this relates to you. I hope to discuss just a couple of things that maybe don't get spoken of in relation to this topic today. So, what is it? Well, it's child sexual abuse, CSA for short, but particularly within the narcissistic family system, because it's doubly impactful when it takes place within the family, and a narcissistic family in particular. And of course, when we discuss anything like this about childhood sexual abuse, this is one of the deepest wounds for people. And I just want to sort of, bookend this and say, look, just prepare yourself. You may get triggered while I'm talking. It may bring up some uncomfortable feelings in memories, some shame, not only while we're in the video, but particularly actually so afterwards when the video ends. So do look after yourself after the video, because some people may find themselves drawn to, I don't know, self-sabotaging behaviors to suppress feelings. So, going to the fridge or having a drink or something like that. So just make sure you have a sort of a care plan after watching this video. Okay, let's dive straight in here now. So in this video, I'm going to talk about child sexual abuse and cover some of the main impacts, particularly to do with the body, but also with the impact on one's own sexuality, the relationship between sexual abuse and gender dysphoria is something I'm going to cover. Then also physical ailments, and then some suggestions about healing from this at the end. Okay. So, childhood sexual abuse, as I've said, has a deeply, deeply profound impact. Unlike any other abuse, really, there's something deeply, profoundly wounding about this. It seems to go to the heart of the person, the core, in a way that other abuse doesn't. And I think that's especially so when it takes place within the close family unit. So if we just remind ourselves, the narcissistic family system is characterized by a distorted power dynamic. And what I mean by that is it's not child-centered as it should be, with the parents sort of focusing in on the needs of the child. It's the opposite. It's parent-centered, and all the children everybody in the system has to be oriented towards the narcissistic parent or two. So the narcissistic parent demands that their needs be met first and foremost by the system. That's what it's there for. And when I say the system, I mean all children, partners, everything is part of the system that supports the narcissist. And you show your allegiance to the narcissist through attention, validation, admiration, and service. You show your allegiance by maintaining the system. Whatever role you're given, that is your job to do. The family, the narcissistic family, is held together by suppression of the truth and suppression or denial of emotions and experiences in order to maintain the family false self, the family facade of we are a normal, perfect family. So not only does the narcissist themselves have a false self, the narcissist family has a false self of this sort of we're a perfectly normal, happy family. So given that now, let's bring in childhood sexual abuse and see how that plays out within that very simple description of the dynamic. So if we recall that narcissists can only see their children as extensions of themselves. That's why they assign different roles. These are different reflections of them, different extensions of them. Coupled with the fact that narcissists are autoerotic. So the narcissistic parent only sees their child as an extension of them with the view of them that they wish to see. They're also autoerotic, which means that they are sexually aroused by the thought of themselves, even by their own bodies. So if we put these two together now within the family system, you have a narcissistic parent, you have a child. The narcissistic parent sees the child as a mere extension of themselves, in other words. And the narcissistic parent is autoerotic, gets aroused by the thought of themselves or their own body. You can imagine then that seeing the child is quite possibly the potential for sexual abuse to take place. So let me explain this in a bit better detail. So the narcissistic parent sees their children as an extension of themselves, and therefore is liable to be aroused by them. And if you come from a narcissistic family, you may have experienced the sort of sexual sort of dominance of the narcissistic parent. There is a bit of a boundarylessness in terms of displaying their sexuality sometimes in front of the children. You're aware as a child of their sexual presence. And of course, the narcissist is not thinking about their impact on the children. They simply have their needs, even their sexual needs, as first and foremost, not the needs of the child. So if that means that they need to walk around naked or they need to say smutty things or whatever it might be, expose somebody to inappropriate material, that's because they are focused on their own needs first and not the child. But they also don't see the child as separate from them. So they're actually meeting their own needs via the child in that sense. Okay, let's carry on here now. When somebody is autoerotic, everything they do sexually is a masturbation, really. And that's important to bear in mind now when we think of childhood sexual abuse, because the child is being used as a means of masturbation. And that in itself is just so highly derogatory. It's so objectifying of anyone, whatever age. But for a child to have that experience at a young age of being the source of someone else's masturbation has tremendous impacts later on in life. So let's look at some of the impacts of this now. And also, if you want to know a little bit more about what I've just been talking about, the objectification, I did write a blog article, which I'll put a link to at the bottom of this video in case you want to explore that a little bit more. Okay, so the impact of this upon the child. Well, first of all, trust is betrayed. They cannot trust their parent. They cannot trust that what their parent does is going to be good for them. There's no more safety with the caregiver. It robs the child, in that sense, of a true family. You know, the sort of ideal family unit is two parents, two caregivers, and you know, that sort of unit being a safe haven. The experience of that, you know, the one parent supporting the other, one providing, one nurturing, that being the sort of safe, ideal environment for a child to grow up in. But where one of those parents is using the child to meet their own sexual needs, is objectifying the child, it robs them of the safety of that unit. There is no unit. In fact, it robs them of the experience of family, because it's not just that one parent, the abusing parent, that the child loses. I suggest it's also the other parent. And why do I say this? Well, because in so many cases, the other parent has in fact been an enabler, has been the one who stood by, who maybe denied what they knew was happening, usually due to their own childhood sexual abuse. But not only because of that, oftentimes it robs the child of the other parent because they can't turn to them out of fear of breaking up mummy and daddy, of breaking up the family unit, or in other cases, of actually sharing with the other parent the traumatic experience, but then not being believed, of being told that they're too sensitive or that they're making it up, and then being left alone, in all cases actually, to try to cope with this situation, the confusion, the shame, on their own, having to be cooperative with denial of it themselves and within the family system in order to hold everything together. Okay. The second impact on children is that it is an outrageous, childhood sexual abuse is an outrageous form of control, of power, and most importantly, of entitlement. The narcissistic parent is basically demonstrating their sense of entitlement to use the body of their child as they wish, to use their body as their own. This arrogance and audacity is what can cause victims to remain silent out of fear and confusion. Narcissistic parents, narcissists in general, do not like boundaries. And for them, the body is not even a physical boundary. It's not even a boundary. Your physical body is not a boundary to the narcissist. It doesn't, just because you have your own body doesn't mean that you get to be separate from them. Your body is not a boundary to them. It's a reflection of them. So it's not a natural barrier between you and them, as it should be. So the child is reinforced with a feeling of learned helplessness in this situation. It can't, how can it defend itself? How can it cope with the boundary violations? It learns that it is helpless in it. It can't say no. And there's a feeling of worthlessness that begins to take root, but it's coupled with a very distorted sense of having some worth too, of being seen, of being noticed, of being wanted, of a bit of a self-esteem boost, because the child sees themselves as so desirable that the parent has chosen them even over the other parent, over the other adult. So there can be a really confusing mixture of, on one hand, feeling worthless and used, but on the other hand, feeling of worth, of value, and wanted. However, what is robbed of the child is that natural sense of their own healthy entitlement. We're all meant to be a little entitled, to stand up for our rights, to have boundaries, to speak our needs. But our healthy entitlement is destroyed in child sexual abuse, and we're made to submit to the entitlement of the parent. And so for survivors, the ability to say no to sexual advances or to anything to do with the body is not always very easy. Number 3, emotional neglect. The narcissistic parent ignores and denies the emotional impact on the child and may even cause them to feel guilt if they show signs of depression later on or self-esteem issues. They may shame them for these, or they may try to link them to other things that are going on, the peer group at school or the other parent, in order to protect themselves. I've also heard of more sort of psychopathic parents who have been quite calculated in their abuse of their children, and sort of done the violation in the early years of the child's life, where our memory recall is not great, often in adulthood, so between the ages of 0 and 3, and the child goes on to develop symptoms of sexual abuse, but can recall nothing. Well, that's because it took place in those earlier years, which has been a feature in the work that I've done with some clients. And that's why hypnotherapy can help sometimes. Not that it can recall memories, which it can, but that wouldn't be the focus, but it can help to make sense um, of symptoms and circumstances and the beliefs that were taken on. Okay. Confusion is another major impact. The child is suddenly thrust out of childhood into an adult's world and confusion settles in. Suddenly they're an object of sexual desire. And that's something really hard to comprehend for a child. They can't make sense of it. To be looked at in a desiring way, or to be touched in a way that elicits arousal is very confusing for a child. They're not sure of what's going on in their body, and it can feel a bit sort of out of control for them. And this causes them to miss out on the carefreeness of childhood and the development of their own sexual fruition, their own sexual coming to life. Their sexuality then is linked to to the parent, toxically linked and stolen from them. So whenever there's a sexual fantasy, they may find now that they're drawn to thinking of the parent, which causes further shame and a further sense of that there's something wrong with them or that they're perverted in some way. This is where the gender dysphoria can come in as well, or body dissociation. So if the sexual abuse in childhood is with the opposite sex parent, it may even be the catalyst for gender dysphoria in the child. Why? Well, the child subconsciously associates the arousal that it may have felt with the same sex parent as something detestable, filthy, perverted. And so, in order to never go there again, because it's something bad and awful and shameful, they sort of shut down the natural drive towards to the opposite sex, and shut off their own, what can I say, their own body sexual identity. And this is where sort of tomboys can develop. Now, I'm not saying this in every case, but it often is a feature of gender dysphoria. That there's a sort of a severing off of the biological sex of the child, because that is what caused the shame, and they never want to participate in that again. So they cut off from their biological gender. If the abuse is from the same-sex parent, it's just as confusing. The child tries to right the disorderedness. Say a boy is abused by his father. By dissociating, the child will try to dissociate from their same sex by becoming the opposite sex in their identity. Somehow it kind of, because it's the father is then seen as something dirty, disgusting, perverted, the boy wants to get away from his natural sexual drive as a man because that's something that is disgusting. And he takes on more of a femininity. I'm not saying this is in every case, but in my view, this could be uh, one of the effects of sexual abuse. Another point here now, the child learns that it is lovable or that it's worth something when it is of use to its parent. And really, that is the crux of everything. The child takes on the message that if I am usable, then I am lovable. And of course, that's not love, that's abuse, use. And this, being usable means having a body that is available and usable, a body that is not with boundaries. Because if you have a body with boundaries, you're not usable. And often this results in a life spent either trying to make oneself physically unattractive. Some of my clients come, they have comfort eating, binge eating, and they've gained lots and lots of weight. But actually, that weight is their way of protecting their bodies, of putting in a boundary where they never had a boundary before, of protecting themselves from being attractive and usable. Because those two things they've kind of associated those two things together now. Being attractive means being usable. And in fact, it means inviting in being used by another. Sometimes others will make themselves attractive. That will be their main focus in life. They'll be, dieting and altering how they look and trying to be this perfect image of attractiveness so that they can maintain a sense of self-worth. However, it's more like presenting an empty shell because the dissociation from the body is so great that they can almost present it as an object, and they treat themselves as an object then, just like their parent did. Another part of this, how it plays out in a victim is that it can end up meaning that the sexual abuse is acted out with siblings. There can be incest, a tendency towards incest, or acting this out with other siblings. And of course, that compounds the sexual shame of the victim. They're trying to make sense of these natural sexual urges that are arising, but of course they're linked to something that's dirty, that's incestuous. And of course then that plays out in other relationships. The abuse by the parent often becomes the source of sexual fantasy in the adult later on. And that can be such a source of shame for people, that they're still fantasizing about daddy or something similar that took place in childhood. And that's that is the real impact here, that taking over, you're never then able to not be an extension of that parent. Okay. Victims also often go on to find themselves either being the third wheel in relationships or as the other man or woman. They may have, they may be the one that somebody has a secret affair with. They may sort of be find themselves feeling uncomfortable when out with friends who are in a couple, and almost expecting to be desired by the partner, secretly desired. The child who's been sexually abused also feels guilt about the other parent. But that can also be coupled with a sense of being better than the other parent. It's a very confusing role to be in, that they've been chosen over the other parent. So they may tend to try to keep themselves small with the other parent out of guilt, but then sort of feel a sense of confidence or strange sort of worth with the abusive parent. The toll of all of this will 100% play out in the body, because that is where the violation first took place. The body is a boundary, but not when there's sexual abuse. Victims don't trust themselves to be able to protect themselves, and they learn that the body is actually a vulnerability, not a protective boundary. They treat their own bodies, they go on to treat their own bodies as objects or commodities, often mistaking attention or admiration or being lusted after as a form of worth and value, as all they can get. The body will often express the trauma in physical ailments, especially things like fibromyalgia, gut disorders, acne, anything to do with the skin. These can all be means of the body expressing or trying to protect from being attractive. Even things like, sort of having constant bloating and things like that serves to, in a way, to protect one from feeling attractive, feeling, inviting the attention of others. But it also reiterates the sense of powerlessness over the body, that the body is not something that you can rely on or trust. So what do we do with all of this? If this has been your case, look, ultimately, what we need to do is to become the good mother, if you're a girl, or the good father, if you were the boy, to yourself. We have to make that inner child within you feel safe and protected and heard and seen and validated in your body. And so we have to take measures to ensure that for that inner child. If you're someone who's been used to dressing really provocatively to get the same sort of attention, well, then we need to address that. Or if you're somebody who's been binge eating so that you gain lots of weight and feel awful about yourself as a means of protection, well, then we need to start working on that. We need to take the steps. We need to bring in healthy boundaries so that inner child is no longer left alone, holding a secret and feeling shameful about it. And I think also, especially in terms of relationships, especially sexual ones, is to really approach with caution. you know, to really take your time, to respect your body. We have to make up for the disrespect and the injustice by treating ourselves with the greatest respect, uh, and really looking out for red flags of someone who tends to use others or is entitled, feels entitled to demand that their sexual needs be met when they want them. We have to also let go of the shame within, especially about acting out those fantasies that were linked to the abuse, and begin to open ourselves up, even to just the possibility of something different. And I think that's all it takes sometimes, is just being open to the possibility of a different type of sexual experience, a different type of relationship. That can have a profound impact, especially on the subconscious. So, if you're struggling with any of these types of symptoms, um, you know, reach out to a therapist. Sexual abuse is something that does need the assistance of a professional, I believe. Um, and you know, I'd be very happy to help you. I have a way of working, you know, using psychotherapy and hypnotherapy that can be very helpful. Um, and I have a lot of experience in this area, both professionally and personally. Okay, everybody, look after yourselves now. Have a cup of tea, and I hope to see you soon. Take care. Bye.